Hello friends, I'm Dee about to react to this vid by Maddie Balls. It's titled Why the CEA is Targeting Rappers. Oop, we got Thug in the thumbnail. What's the update on his case? What's happening? Is the CIA targeting him? That's why he's still in jail? Let's see what's going on. Let's watch.
About a year ago, Ice Cube went on Bill Maher's podcast and said this.
This ain't rap music, but today, same people who own the labels own the prisons.
Literally the same people?
Literally the same people.
But it goes deeper, with many people believing that the CIA aided the prison industry.
I remember something about how the CIA was watching NWA. I do recall hearing that in a documentary or something. So he's not lying.
In their attempt to hijack hip-hop and use it as a psyop. For a long time, there have been multiple conspiracy theories that the CIA has used hip-hop as a psyop, that the FBI has always been involved in the investigation of rappers, and that the prison industry, like Ice Cube said, is directly
funnel them into the prison
with the
system.
genre. Now, Ice Cube has been in the game for decades, as a member of NWA, as a successful solo artist, and with a successful acting career, which is why I feel like his claim may have a little bit of validity. And the theory goes much deeper than just the prison industry. But with conspiracy theories being thrown around all the time, it's hard to tell fact from fiction. So today I wanted to look into all of these theories and see how they work with one another. First, I want to clarify, I've seen these theories and I think they're interesting, but I'm also not like some conspiracy nut. I've done a bunch of videos talking about conspiracy theories because I just find them interesting to look into. The only reason I'm really looking into this one is because Ice Cube said it, and as someone who's been in the game for so long, I feel like there's a bit more validity to him saying it than some random nerd on Reddit saying it. So yeah, that's why I'm looking into it and gathering all the possible information and seeing if there is any truth to these claims as objectively as possible. Also, I want to clarify that the CIA, FBI, or any other government apparatus that I refer to sometimes just generally refers to the government because it can get a little tricky with all the names of the organizations. Like in the title of the video, I don't literally mean the CIA. It could be any subdivision.
No, the CIA you'll see what I mean throughout the video.
So let's just check it out. On July 2nd of 2023, Bill Maher released an episode of his Club Random podcast featuring Ice Cube, in which they spent a small chunk of time speaking on this theory. They got onto the subject of division in America, more specifically racial division, and that is when Cube brought up his thoughts on hip-hop in prison.
Same people who own the labels own the prisons.
Literally the same people?
Literally the same people who own the labels own private prisons. You know, it seems really kind of suspicious, if you want to say that word, that the records that come out are really geared to push people towards that prison industry.
Bill pushed back a bit and said that the labels didn't make him write certain lyrics, to which Cube said, they don't tell you what to write, but there are guardrails so certain songs, like the more provocative songs, get released, while maybe the more positive ones don't.
You know, some records are made by committee, meaning record company guys sit around and tell the artists, this is hot, say that, do this. We're gonna have this guy write the lyrics. We're gonna have that.
Cube said he felt like there was some social engineering going on to make sure the prisons stay full. He also went on to clarify that the people he said were running the labels in prisons weren't actually in charge like the CEOs, but that they have financial interest. So basically Cube is saying that they're trying to get these artists to say certain things so that people are influenced to commit more crimes, which in turn keeps the prisons full, which then gets the prisons to make more money. We know that this is at least possible because of multiple studies done.
That's the same with the healthcare system, how they, basically want to keep people sick so that you keep needing medicine.
Music can affect both your mood and your decision making, especially when you're younger and easier to influence. After being showed a clip of this, Dame Dash, the co-founder of Rockefeller Records, agreed with him as well.
Being controlled by the label,
you can
this is how they do it.
What are your thoughts on what he's saying here?
It's true. It's obvious.
Now, Ice Cube only brought up the prison industry, but theories like this often tie into the idea that the CIA has been involved in hip-hop, with some even suggesting that they were involved in the inception of hip-hop, but I think that one's a bit too far-fetched. And even the rapper Burner said to Bootleg Kev that he believes the CIA has some sort of influence in hip-hop.
I think there's people in our culture right now.
Because, rap started by just the old school niggas in circles, just, rapping to each other on the corner. I doubt CIA had anything to do with that.
There's a lot of trouble on the internet and with other celebrities. I believe they're working for the CIA. That's my honest opinion. I'm like, there's no way this guy is constantly trying to tempt people and throw people off their game and get them to say or do other things that might put them in jail. It's been the agenda against minorities for a long time.
On top of that, Crazy Bone, a member of the group Bone Thugs and Harmony, said that he also believes the same thing that Ice Cube said.
You really believe that's a thing?
Man, yes, it could be. There's a lot of big corporations that have ownership in prisons. It's rich black people that got ownership in prisons.
Right.
They just don't go around bragging about it. That's one big move they don't go around bragging about.
So I definitely think it's interesting that a handful of artists in the game do have this belief, especially the well-established and well-connected artists who have been on major labels. But before we can look into any evidence, we first have to understand one of the major things that kicked off this whole conspiracy theory. In 2012, a blog post from the website Hip Hop Is Red went live that was titled "The Secret Meeting That Changed Rap Music and Destroyed a Generation." The writer said that this anonymous letter had landed in their inbox, so they decided to post it. It starts, "After more than 20 years, I finally decided to tell the world what I witnessed in 1991, which I believe was one of the biggest turning points in popular music, and ultimately American society." The author continues, "Between the late 80s and early 90s, I was what you may call a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry." They continued to say that in 1991, they were invited to a closed-door meeting with a small group of music business insiders to discuss rap's new direction. The author said the meeting had 25 to 30 people, with mostly familiar faces, but the author also said, "Among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize beyond their circle. Many readers assumed that these men in suits were either the CIA, the FBI, or involved in the prison industry, or maybe a combination of all three." He said that the unfamiliar people went around and made people sign a confidentiality agreement. Apparently, a speaker came up and said that the companies they worked for in the music industry were building privately owned prisons. Since they were government funded, the more prisoners in the prison, the more money the prison makes, which is true, by the way. The author then said that their job was to market music that promotes criminal behavior, with rap being the music of choice. They continued to say that some people got mad, including the author, and were escorted out after one of the men pulled a gun. The author then said that they kept quiet out of fear for 20 years and noticed the change in hip-hop. Now, of course, there's no proof for this, but this story spread like a wildfire. It even had Alex Jones on Twitter claiming Ice Cube had direct knowledge. And after that, a Twitter user said since NWA was...
This makes a lot of sense, especially now when you think about how, like, rap has always had, you know, a violent tone and has, you know, promoted, I don't want to say it's promoted violence, but you have these guys who grew up in the hood. They're just basically talking about their experience growing up. I mean, the projects are a ghetto place, a violent place, so shit happens. But back then, I feel like people were just, you know, conveying their experience. But that has completely transitioned to, you know, this drill rap where you have these rappers just blatantly talking about killing people and like how it's fun and yeah, to my dead ops, fuck y'all, and like I want to kill tomorrow, like, you know, it's shit like that. So it's gotten a lot more blatant now, which is wild. So I guess their plan worked out.
Active from 87 to 91, they were directly involved in this. This bold claim upset Ice Cube, who actually responded saying, "Opinions are like apples. Everyone has one and they all stink. What evidence do you have to make a statement like that?" So despite Cube denying any involvement in that alleged meeting, it still spread like a wildfire over the internet. Cube has also denied accusations of NWA destroying hip-hop, basically saying that all the stuff they rapped about was a reflection of their environment, and they were just talking about things that were already going on, which is definitely very important to understand when talking about the gangster rap genre. But Crazy Bone, who I mentioned earlier, directly referred to this letter, saying he believes it, and also spoke on his own experience, saying that this attempt to make songs a certain way happened to him and his group.
Have you ever been approached by any weird shit in the music industry, or in terms of that, like them trying to get y'all to, yeah, say this, do that, you know?
Bro, you know what I'm saying? Like, when I tell people, you know what I'm saying, as far as music, I tell people this, you know what I'm saying? Like, we didn't come out like trying to glorify violence or none of that. We were led to believe this is your chance to tell your story.
Right.
They the ones with the cameras. They the ones glorified. They the ones put it on TV saying, did this and did that, you know what I'm saying, put it in front of them like,
And I will say this testament from Crazy Bone is definitely interesting. The following year, a blog post went live titled, "Don't Believe the Hype, a counterpoint to the secret meeting that changed rap's story." One of the first points of this post was that he left a lot of breadcrumbs for someone who wanted to remain anonymous, which was true. I skimmed over it when I read it, but when you're saying where you are from, your location history, and the fact that you're among the 30 people in a room, it can't be too hard to narrow it down. The second point they brought up was that the story was emailed to Hip Hop Is Red, rather than a bigger or much more credible blog site. And the third point they brought up is that gangster rap had been around before that meeting in 1991 and had already been spreading. The author went into detail of gangster rap songs and artists that were already out. They also showed a graph of incarcerated Americans, which began spiking in the 80s and followed suit in the 90s. The author points out that the spike was not in the 90s, like it probably would have been had this secret meeting worked out the way they wanted it to. So this was a solid counter-argument, and so far there has been no evidence provided by either side.
Also, it is very possible that he changed the specific information so that it would throw people off his trail. So he's saying, I'm from New Jersey, probably from California, so that's also possible. And then about why you sent it to like a smaller blog post, he probably sent it to several people, but they were the only one who posted it. Maybe the bigger blogs just didn't post it.
But before we can get to the evidence, I do think it's important to see if this is even in the realm of possibility. The short answer is yes, and I think that's pretty obvious. But there are some pretty crazy examples of US government entities doing similar things that I think will blow your mind when we cover them. With the first one being an example of a US government agency literally trying to use rap as a psyop. USAID, or the United States Agency for International Development, tried to use Cuban hip-hop to undermine the president at the time, Raul Castro. According to The Guardian, the idea was to use Cuba's rappers to break the information blockade and build a network of young people seeking social change to spark a youth movement against the government of President Raul Castro. They first started recruiting musicians for projects disguised as cultural initiatives, but really aimed at boosting their visibility and stoking a movement of fans to challenge the government. USAID also paid $15,000 to underwrite an arts and music festival. Their secret aim was to seed the minds of festival organizers with new ideas and persuade them to send high-impact messages to the audience. Of course, this whole time, USAID was using contractors, so it wasn't directly linked to them. However, this attempt ended up being a dumpster fire, as many people involved were caught by the Cuban government, which led to many musicians leaving the country out of fear, and a festival being shut down after the Cuban government linked it to USAID, or at least they suspected some US government agency was behind it. So I think the fact that the US government has literally tried this in other countries doesn't make it so far-fetched to happen here. It also means my title isn't too baity because the US government has literally tried to use rap as a psyop. However, I think their failures are important to keep in mind.
And people wonder why there are some people who don't care about politics or trust politics. I feel like people who don't care, this is kind of side note, but people who don't care about politics, a lot of them just don't trust it. Like, this government is so fucking corrupt and shady. Like, people who are into politics and thinking that their vote actually counts and actually matters, you think this corrupt, shady ass government is actually fairly counting votes? And they've been exposed so many times for like rigging votes and shit. So it's like, bro, this country is so shady. And given that, it probably was effective, their master plan was effective in the States, that's probably why they were like, hey, it worked here, let's go try this in other countries. Like, that's so fucked.
The CIA has also been known to use other genres to influence others in an attempt to achieve their goals. For example, the CIA created two divisions called the Propaganda Assets Inventory and the International Organizations Division. One time they funded a Russian composer named Nicholas Nabokov to mount exhibitions, stage concerts, and sponsor anti-communist activity to combat the appeal of communism in Europe. And there were other artists they hired to fight communism with songs. This is why there is a theory that the Scorpions song Wind of Change was actually sponsored by the CIA, because it was an anthem to the end of the Cold War. The CIA also got their hands on jazz, and actually sponsored Louis Armstrong tours in Europe and Africa. Dizzy Gillespie joined the first State Department organized tour in 1956, and the white jazz pianist Dave Brubeck went on a 12-concert tour of the USSR in 1985. So on top of them using musicians to spread their propaganda, they've also been known to aid in the production of movies like Animal Farm, which I'm sure most of you have read and probably know. It's very anti-communist. The CIA CIA has even been known to fund movies or influence directors to make them look cool. And it worked. I mean, I remember being a kid thinking the CIA was super cool. So not only have government entities used rap, but they have regularly used other genres to influence others in their favor. On top of all of this, the US government has also been known to use their agencies to investigate and discredit black artists. It all started with the FBI's counterintelligence program, or COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO had a lot of objectives. According to PS Mag, to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize subversive political groups. Though the program targeted many different progressive movements, it spent most of its energy attempting to suppress black civil rights groups and prominent black figures with connections to civil rights groups, however small. COINTELPRO infamously sent Martin Luther King Jr. a letter in 1964 encouraging him to commit suicide. And all of this is true, by the way, which is absolutely crazy. I know it sounds like fiction or conspiracy theory, but all of it actually happened and has been declassified or investigated or whatever. And it wasn't just politicians or civil rights activists, it was also musicians who had similar ideologies. Jazz pianist Nat King Cole was investigated, Duke Ellington was investigated, Jimi Hendrix was investigated, and many others were too. There also was, of course, the very popular instance where the FBI sent a letter to NWA's label after their song F the Police was released. They have also thoroughly investigated.
Oh my god, it was the FBI, not CIA.
Rappers like Tupac, Eazy-E, Biggie, and the Wu-Tang Clan. So we know that the US government has tried to use rap as a psyop in other countries. We know that the CIA has used other genres to fight against communism, and that the FBI and other groups have thoroughly been involved with black musicians throughout the history of the United States. And while all of this definitely means that Ice Cube's theories and the other theories could be true, is there actually any evidence that the prison industry and the CIA are trying to use rap as a psyop to get more people incarcerated? Well, we have to dig a bit deeper.
You don't have to dig real deep. Obviously, I don't want nobody to know.
This is where the theory
Google
tends to get a little spotty. When people bring up this theory, their main point is that the three major labels, Warner Records, Sony Music Group, and Universal Music Group, are associated with the two largest private prison companies, CoreCivic and GEO Group. These two companies own the most private prisons in the United States out of any other companies. So how are they connected? Well, their largest shareholders are the investment firms BlackRock and Vanguard. And this is mostly true, not just something alleged by theorists. BlackRock and Vanguard have the most shares of GEO. They also have the most shares of CoreCivic. Sony's largest investor is PrimeCap Management Company, which is a separate entity from BlackRock and Vanguard, but they have been known to work with Vanguard in the past. Although BlackRock and Vanguard themselves aren't even in the top 5 of shareholders. And Warner Music Group's top 2 investors are neither BlackRock nor Vanguard, although Vanguard is number 3. So there definitely is some financial interest, but you also need to understand how companies like this work. They don't have enough shares to actually own any of these companies. They are investment management companies. I'm gonna have someone else smarter than me explain this, but I know it's something that a lot of people, including myself, have seemed to misunderstand.
Who do you think is the most powerful man on the planet?
BlackRock.
How much power do you have if you don't actually own anything? BlackRock manages $10 trillion, and it absolutely gives them outsized influence on global finance. But it's not their money. It's other people's pensions, endowments, and sovereign wealth funds. Assets that they actually own only total to about $170 billion. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway owns $1 trillion. Owns. Not manages.
Of course, maybe there are some shady people with financial interest behind the scenes, but this just isn't enough evidence. And I don't think the BlackRock and Vanguard example is enough either, because they are the top shareholders of so many companies, so it isn't like it's just some freak coincidence. Another piece of evidence I've seen brought up by many people who believe this was an excerpt from an article written by the rapper Homeboy Sandman called Jailhouse Rock: The Facts About Hip Hop and Prison for Profit. The article was also written in 2013, around the time that this theory had been circulating the internet. Sandman said, "Last year, Corrections Corporation of America, which is now CoreCivic, the company I just mentioned earlier, the biggest name in the private prison industry, contacted 48 states offering to buy their prisons. One stipulation of eligibility for the deal was particularly bizarre: an assurance by the agency partner that the agency has sufficient inmate population to maintain a minimum 90% occupancy rate over the term of the contract." 2 months later, an anonymous email was sent out to various members of the music and publishing industries, giving an account of a meeting where it was determined that hip-hop music would be manipulated to drive up privatized prison profits. Sandman also started started off the article by saying, "This is not my opinion." So basically though, he cited the letter that doesn't have much proof and backed most of this up by claiming that BlackRock and Vanguard own most of these companies. He was right, however, about the letter guaranteeing a 90% occupancy rate, which upset a lot of people when that happened, because if we're being honest, that's not the best mindset for prisons to have. Sandman mixed a lot of true things about the prison industry into his own article, but used these facts to jump to a conclusion that wasn't quite there yet. And this is about all there is in the way of evidence when it comes to this theory. Just multiple people's words and opinions, combined with the misunderstanding of management companies. So there has never been any definitive proof or evidence that the CIA or prison industry has directly tried to use hip-hop as a tool of mass incarceration. However, like we've seen in this video, groups similar to the CIA, such as the FBI, COINTELPRO, and USAID all use music and sometimes even hip-hop to try to achieve their goals. Of course, the prison industry has plenty of incentives to keep people in prison and get more people in prison, but whether or not they are using hip-hop for it, well, there just isn't enough proof for it. As of now, it is just hearsay. All we can do now is take into consideration people in the industry's accounts, the other examples I mentioned, and try to figure out what to do with that information.
And that's the thing, like, it's not like we're gonna have this information like readily available for us to consume and figure out. Like, obviously they're gonna keep this shit under wraps. That's why they have these classified documents. Like, they are sure to, you know, cover their tracks and try to ensure that it doesn't get released to the public. But there are always leaks to some degree. There are people who are a part of these operations who feel bad and feel like, this is fucked up. What am I doing? I gotta tell somebody what's going on. You know, so that's how leaks occur. So, you know, you just have to keep in mind the track record of this government. And a lot of governments are shady. So let me not just single out the American government, but you just have to be aware of the really twisted, fucked up things that they have been exposed for doing, the things that have leaked that are just 100% fact, and go based on that. Like, is it too far-fetched to believe that they would do this as well? You know? So, yeah, very sick, twisted shit. And like I said, given the state of rap now and how drill has become so popular and people want to be like how King Von was, this isn't too far-fetched at all, in my opinion. But y'all let me know what y'all think. Let me know what other videos you want to watch, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!